So it looks like it is 6:01. What do you think, Don? Should we get started?
I think so. I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Dawn Griswold, and I serve as the chair for the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board. Thanks you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us tonight to hear some important information that we have to share with you. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce a few people that you'll hear from tonight. The first person I'd like to introduce is Sue McCormick. And Sue is a professional facilitator who's been working with the school board for over the past 2 years, helping us to make sure we are engaging our community and getting your input into some big decisions that we're facing. Tonight you'll also hear from Krista Siringo. Krista is a school board member representing Bristol, and she's the chair of the Community Engagement Committee. And that committee has been working hard over the last 2 years to help us get in touch with our community members. You'll also hear from Kevin Hansen, a school board member, again, representing Bristol, and he's the chair of the Facilities Feasibility Committee. And Kevin and that committee have been working hard to comb through all that information that was included in the study report we got back. And finally, you'll hear from Patrick Green, our district superintendent and educational leader. We have a lot to share with you tonight, so let's get started, and thanks again.
Thanks so much, Don. Hi, everyone. I'm Sue. It's so good to be with you tonight. And I'm going to serve in a bit of a moderator role tonight just to help keep our meeting moving smoothly. I just give you a little bit of information about the purpose of the meeting. You're going to hear from Krista and Kevin. They're going to share some information about some of the challenges the district is facing and some of what they're learning and how they're approaching the work to make some big decisions, as Don said. And after we hear some of that information, you all are going to have a chance to ask some questions, and then we're going to have an opportunity for you all to do a little bit of small group work to talk through what you're hearing, see if there are any key questions that you have that you want to share back with the group. So that's a little bit about the flow of the meeting. A couple of considerations to keep in mind, and Shannon, if you can just share the screen for a moment, we can put these up here. But first of all, we want everyone to be aware that this meeting is being recorded. So that's one thing. We're asking people to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. I think we're all getting pretty skilled at that. And then during the time of the meeting when we're talking in small groups, we just have a couple of very basic agreements that we hope you'll adhere to just to help us have a productive conversation. So in the small groups, we just want to make sure that all ideas people share get a fair hearing. We want to make sure that every person gets a chance to speak. There are a lot of people on the call tonight. We want to make sure that in addition to listening and taking in a lot of information, you have a chance to reflect on it. And then if you do hear some personal stories in those small group conversations, we want you to consider those as confidential unless you have explicit permission to share them. Again, the purpose of those agreements is to help you all feel like you can have a very frank conversation about these issues. So with that, what I'd like to do is start, and Shannon, you can stop sharing the screen now if you'd like.
Sue, we have a clarifying question.
Sure.
If people have clarifying questions during the presentation, will they have the opportunity to ask?
Yes, before we do any small group conversation and after you hear some information, as a full group, we're going to do some question and answer. So you'll have time to ask questions and hear answers as a full group before we go into the small groups. We did want to get a sense of who's in the room tonight. We have way too many people here to go through introductions. So I'm going to ask Shannon, who's graciously helping us with some of the technology, to put up a couple of polls. And we want to get a sense of your connection with the school district and also what town you're from. So if you can take a moment to answer this poll, we can quickly get a sense of who's with us tonight.
I can't see where to answer the poll.
Are other people able to see the poll? If you're on a laptop, if you clicked on the bottom of your screen, there's a little button that says polling. And if you click on that, hopefully the poll will pop up. Let us know if that works.
If you're on your phone, how does it work?
If you're on your phone, those buttons are in a different place depending on what kind of phone you have. Sometimes they're on the left side, so you may have to kind of swipe around a little bit to see if you can find them.
If you have an iPhone, it's at the top.
And Shannon, when you feel like we've got most people responding, I know that you have to click end poll before it will allow you to share it with everyone. Can I see some thumbs up of folks who've been able to answer the poll? Let's see, we've got, I'm looking at lots of thumbs up. Great. So Shannon, I think that we should be able to show that. And before we do that, Allison, I see that you have your hand raised. Did you have a question? Allison, you can unmute yourself if you have a question.
No, I don't have a question. I'm a little behind on the technology here, but I raised my hand because you said, can I have a show of hands? So there was a more button and it said, raise your hand. So I.
Fantastic, Allison. You did we have people raising their hands in their video with the thumbs up and in the participant. That's great. Thank you for doing that. Okay, so let's take a look here. So
I'm seeing the results. Are you seeing any, Sue?
yes. So
Okay.
we're looking at the results. So we have a really nice representation of people here tonight. All the towns are represented, which is great. We seem to have at least one student with us, and we have lots of community members. That's the highest percentage, and then we have family members, staff, and school board members. So this is really great. It helps us know that we have a nice diverse group of people here to listen to this information and share some of your thoughts. So that's great. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, and we thought that we would begin by just hearing a little bit of an update about how things are going. We are in an unprecedented time, and we think it would be helpful for the community to just get a sense of how the schools are doing and how your students are doing. So Patrick, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thank you. So I would say things are going as well as we can expect, given these unprecedented times, as you said, Sue. Just for context, our elementary schools are currently back 5 days per week. We do have an early release day every Wednesday. There is also an option for virtual elementary school for students whose families aren't ready for the children to be back in school physically. And the enrollment at last check in that virtual elementary school was at 32. In grades 7 through 12, they are still in the hybrid model. So students are at school 2 days a week and they're remote 3 days a week. So for teachers, that means they're physically at work instructing in person Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday. We do also have an option for fully remote students at the secondary level. And there are currently 63 students electing that fully remote option in grades 7-12. I'd say the elementary return to fully in-person is going really well. People are adjusting to the new normal and, in school, in the classrooms, wearing masks and keeping distance is becoming really the new normal. I even have heard a couple of principals say how when kids are at recess and they're outside and physically distanced and can have their mask off, they forget their mask is on, which I think is a piece of evidence that it's becoming more familiar and comfortable for kids to be wearing a mask. At Mount Abe, they are still working in the hybrid model, as I said, which is really hard. It's hard to juggle, and it was hard for our elementary teachers as well when we were in the hybrid model for grades K-6. But it's really hard to juggle the in-person students, the hybrid students, so those students that would be in person on the other 2 days, and the all remote students. So sort of 3 groups of students at a time trying to stay on top of, which is really hard, but our teachers are doing a great job. Having those Wednesdays where students aren't present and there's not that in-person instruction happening is really important for teachers. Gives them that time to stay on top of all 3 groups and connect with their colleagues and really just try to continue to manage this sort of challenging hybrid model that we're working through. We're still pretty early in the school year, so there's still a lot of emphasis on social and emotional health. You know, thinking about one of the community values that surfaced last fall, being socially and emotionally healthy kids. That's very much evident and alive in our schools right now. Guidance counselors are routinely checking in with students. Our staff are really all focused on supporting the social and emotional needs of students. So that's very much a focus for us still at this point in the school year. We are really happy to have our elementary students back 5 days a week. We know how hard it was for families during our all remote and our hybrid models. Juggling home life, work life, school life really created some tremendous hardships for our families. And having the elementary kids back 5 days a week is critical in helping to ensure equity for our students, which is also a community value. During our all remote phase in the spring, we noticed a lot of inequities in the kinds of support and experience that students were receiving, just given each family's circumstances and what each family had to go through to juggle what that meant for them. So having our elementary students back in person 5 days a week really helps address that concern of equity. Some similar challenges do still exist in the hybrid model at Mount Abe. Some students are doing really well, and some are really struggling with the hybrid model. We've been looking for ways to safely bring back some of our 7-12 students for more in-person instruction, but unfortunately at this point we haven't been able to find a way to do so safely while adhering to the guidance from the Department of Health and the Agency of Education. We are going to continue to keep exploring options, and hopefully at some point, you know, the science and the epidemic itself will get to a point where we can safely bring more students back. We are really keenly aware that there is risk to bringing students back for more in-person instruction, but we also are really keenly aware that there's risk to not bringing students back for more in-person instruction. And we've been working really hard to navigate those risks and make decisions that are in the best interest of our students as we try to do so. And that work of navigating these risks and weighing the pros and cons and trying to strike that balance as this pandemic unfolds over the next several months is something that's going to certainly continue. And again, we'll continue to make those decisions, weighing all those factors, keeping what's in the best interest of students and families in mind.
Thanks, Patrick, for that introduction. And now that we've heard a little about how the schools are doing, how our students are doing, I'm going to turn it over to Krista to talk a little bit about some of the work that's happened to engage with the community around some of the longer term issues that you all are facing. So Krista.
Thank you, Sue. And thank you, Patrick, for sharing that update. And I think I probably speak for all of us when I say how much we appreciate all of the work of the teachers and the staff and you and your team to figure out how to get kids back in school in as normal a way as possible, considering these really abnormal times. So while all that work has been happening, the work of the school board around thinking about the longer term planning that needs to happen has continued. And we wanted to take a little bit of time to update everyone on where that planning is and give you a sense of how things are moving forward. And our goal really is thinking about how to build a sustainable school system for our future. So 5, 10 years and beyond. So Shannon, if you could go to the timeline slide, great. So this timeline is something that the school board has been working from, and the Community Engagement Committee, which is focused on engaging our community around these conversations about this long-term planning. So the work really began in earnest last fall, and I imagine some or many of you participated in the conversations that we had in all 5 of our towns, as well as with our staff members and with students. And in those conversations, we shared with folks some of the dilemmas we were facing around our facilities that need maintenance, and particularly Mount Abe is probably the one that needed the most attention, and trying to figure out how to plan for that maintenance. And then also recognizing the trends around declining enrollment, which has a direct impact on our revenue, and the increased costs that we are grappling with, particularly around health insurance, but all of our fixed costs have been going up. So we wanted to let folks know last fall about all of those kind of converging factors and get input into both what people really value about their community schools, what we all believe we want kids to know and learn by the time they graduate from Mount Abe, and what out of all these conversations we would identify as our core educational values. And Patrick mentioned one of those earlier around social and emotional learning. And there are 7 or 8 values that were pretty consistent across our community in these conversations. And they have been really a key part of our planning and conversations as a board in terms of how to think about the future and keeping those values in the forefront of our minds. So we had all those conversations and did all of that work. And then actually, Shannon, if you could go back, great. And we, in the winter, we came up with some scenarios that we thought we might want to look more closely at. We also formed a facilities feasibility study committee, which Kevin's going to talk a little bit more about later. And then our planning or our conversations with the community kind of took a pause while that work began, but then we also had to start dealing with COVID. And so while in the early spring, things were pretty quiet on the community engagement front, in the background, some of this work was happening. Around the middle of the summer, we decided it was time to start rebooting some of these conversations about our longer term plan with the community. And that's part of why we're here with you this evening. We want to inform and re-inform folks about what it is we are grappling with. So for some folks, you might be already pretty keenly aware of this and participated in those conversations. There are lots of other people in our community for which this is new information. And at the same time, at the board level, we are looking at developing our budget for next year and the impacts that budget has on future years. And so we know that we need to continue to move these conversations forward. So as we thought about how to start those conversations in the community again, we've done a couple of different things. One is to distribute a mailer. And so it looks like this, and hopefully you all received this. It went to all 5 town residents and describe some of these factors that I mentioned that we're grappling with and our plan for trying to form a long-term plan for our district. We also developed a series of video shorts, and 2 of the 3 of those have gone out already. The 3rd is still in the works. And we're conducting these town halls. And so this is all our way to start this conversation again and to get everybody up to speed and all of the different things we're thinking about. So Shannon, if you could go to the next slide, I'd like to just take a moment to show this first video again. I think it does a really nice job. It's only about 2.5 minutes long, so even if you've seen it, I hope you won't mind watching it again. It does a really nice job of taking some of these complex issues and presenting them in a pretty digestible way. And this first one focuses on some background info. So if we could show that, Shannon, that would be great.
Shannon, if you could unmute yourself, that would be awesome. Then we'll be able to hear.
Over 50 years ago, Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, New Haven, and Starksboro came together to form the Addison Northeast Supervisory Union. A group of ANESU administrators, community, and board members had Mount Abraham Union Middle and High School built in 1969 to meet five-town students' educational needs. Fast forward to 2016. All five towns vote to consolidate, and the Mount Abraham Unified School District is created. Like many school districts in Vermont, MAUSD is facing significant challenges, most of which predated the current COVID-19 pandemic. 1. Decreased state funding due to declining student enrollment. 2. Improving student outcomes. 3. Aging facilities. And 4. Ensuring all students have access to equitable academic experiences. The complex question we face in 2020 is this: how can we shape our future together and create a vision to improve our students' education in a sustainable and fiscally responsible way? To help begin gathering information to answer this question, MAUSD reached out to the five-town communities and held 7 community engagement meetings in the fall of 2019. Over 250 parents, community members, staff, students, administrators, and board members attended these meetings. Values, ideas, and essential questions expressed at these meetings have informed administrators and the board as we problem solve what configuration of programming, facilities, grades, and staffing will best serve our pre-K through 12 students in the future. As in the late 1960s, the five-town schools are at a critical juncture. In the next of our series of 3 videos, we'll share more details about the challenges, including the MAUSD financial picture, enrollment trends, and information from the NESDEC Facilities Best Use Study. After we share this critical information, MAUSD will continue seeking community input via a survey in October. Thank you for watching. Please share with your friends and neighbors.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shannon. And if we could go to the next slide, what I'd like to do is, I hope you have your popcorn ready, because I'd like to show the next video for you as well. So this one provides some more detail to the data around the data that we're looking at and the different scenarios that we're exploring. This one is about 3.5 minutes long. I want to mention that both videos talk about a community survey going out at the end of October. And we've actually had some good conversations and have decided to push the survey out until mid-December. We want to make sure that we have a really well-timed and robust way to get input from our community that that the board can make good use of when trying to figure out what we might want to put before voters on town meeting day. So I just want to point out before I show this second video that that we will be doing a survey, but that it will be coming out in mid-December. So if we can show the next video, Shannon, that would be great.
Welcome to MAUSD Shorts number 2, The Reality. In the last video, we shared current and future challenges facing the five-town schools and how administrators, the board, staff, students, parents, and community members came together to identify education values and vision. In video number 2, we'll present the data driving this conversation and details about how we'll continue to seek community input. In 2010, there were 1,662 students in the five-town schools. By last year, that number had dropped by 18.5% to 1,354. Projections from the New England School Development Council predict another 15% drop in student enrollment by 2030. What makes this concerning is that any drop in student enrollment creates a deficit in the MAUSD budget. We are only allowed to spend up to the state per pupil spending threshold before paying a tax penalty. The state created this mechanism to control the cost of education. For each dollar spent above a given year's spending threshold, communities must send an extra dollar to the state. The MAUSD board has chosen to stay below that threshold to avoid paying this penalty. Because of fixed costs, such as salaries, health insurance, and building costs, we have to make up deficits with reductions to staff and/or programming, deferring building maintenance or upgrades, or by raising taxes. Looking 5 years out, if we keep the same programming, staffing levels, and facilities we have today, projections indicate we would exceed that state spending threshold by as much as $6.5 million. What would that mean for our school tax rates? Using current assumptions and projections, if we make no changes, school tax rates for a home valued at $200,000 are projected to increase $1,598 by 2026. Due to projected enrollment declines, taxes become unsustainable even before 2026. A side note, the long-term fiscal projections presented in this video will not be affected by legislature's short-term relief actions due to COVID-19 for the 2022 budget. While schools will need less staff due to declining enrollment, if we are to cut the budget through personnel cuts alone, it would also cause a significant reduction in programming as well. This goes against our community's education values, which prioritize improved educational outcomes and options for students. In the NESDEC Best Use study of the 6 MAUSD schools, you can see each has space, none are at capacity, and some can take in many more students than they currently have. The Facilities Feasibility Planning Committee has been working with the NESDEC study and input from the community engagement meetings to begin creating a menu of possible options. They are considering academic programming, operating, maintenance and renovation costs of each building, and looking at the advantages of keeping town schools open as they consider the most viable options for moving forward. MAUSD has shared this information to help the five-town community understand that together, we need to make some significant decisions to help keep our school districts affordable, sustainable, and take care of students' academic needs into the future. Video number 3 will focus on future possibilities. We will be giving community members a chance to ask questions about this information and provide input through a virtual town hall on October 14th and 20th, and a survey at the end of October. You can find more in-depth data and information, including the NESDEC study, and how to sign up for one of our October town halls on our website, www.mausd.org/CEC. Thank you for watching. Please share this video with other five-town friends.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. So this is a lot of talking at, oops.
The reality.
So we're doing a lot of talking at you, and I promise that you will have a chance to ask questions and talk with us about some of this information. But I want to introduce Kevin Hansen, who is the chair of our Facilities Feasibility Study Committee, because you were introduced to some different reports and scenarios in these videos, but he's going to talk more in detail about the work of his committee and a little more about that information. And then I promise we're going to pause for questions and discussion. So Shannon, I think you could probably stop sharing the screen and we can turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you. Actually, we should probably continue to share the screen. There are some slides that list some of the high points that I'm going to be talking about that may help people follow along.
That sounds great. Kevin, maybe you can get started so people can just see your face for a few moments before we go back to sharing, and then Shannon can go back to sharing.
Okay. We'll want to back up just a little bit and talk about the scope of the NESDEC report. If you look at what the original proposal is, we did receive a complete report for what we asked for and what we were considering. The report was commissioned to analyze the current capacity with respect to students and enrollment trends. The assessment looked at each campus and the current utilization of those as a district. It also took a deeper dive into projecting future enrollment for the division as a whole. It looked at birth rates, both current and recent history, and projected based on trends what would be over the next planning year of 10 years. They all, and as a basis to help them figure out the projections, they looked at new housing rates of construction in the 5 towns, zoning regulations, and how they enhance or control build out. They looked at the real estate market to see what the appetite is or what historical trends are for buying and selling houses in the area. And they also considered regional and national trends. They are a organization that works throughout New England, so they have a lot of depth as to trends in the New England area. The report addressed the possible reutilization options based on the enrollment projections that they developed. The report also took a look at possibility of options to partner with Addison Northwest School District, which we also know as Virgins. The report, and this is one of the things that seems to be a gap in understanding quite often, but the report does acknowledge the operation of 6 schools, but it doesn't specifically create an option to operate 6 schools. Mostly because that information is known information within the administration, Patrick's team, and NESDEC couldn't offer any additional information other than what we already know internally through our team. So we didn't specifically keep that as an option through report, although it was assumed to be an option. Shannon, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So the board has come to understand a few things about the changes, and we might have to make for our current situation, which is 1 to 3 years. So any big decisions that are made will not happen instantaneously. And also for the planning period over the next 3 to 10 years. The NESDEC report provided us with a little bit of a deeper dive into demographics and enrollment and facilities capacity so that we could be assured that we're planning from the right aspects. If you want to go to the next slide. So the board has come to understand some things of what the board has within the realm of decision making, and also what the towns have is within the realms of their decision making. The board obviously is looking for a quality educational experience for students to have. Those are based on the policy called the ENDS policy, which really talks about the expectations for students. And it closely aligns with a lot of the values, if not all of them, that came up through the community engagement process last fall. The board has also agreed that we want to contain costs and provide an education at a reasonable cost, so we have avoided going over the per pupil spending threshold. And also, the board needs to think about how to use school buildings effectively. As they are today, or if there's some other configuration, or if there's a reconfiguration of grades, for instance. Those are sort of the things that the board is grappling with. Next slide, please. So the towns ultimately have to decide what the funding is for the school system to operate. For local aspects, and obviously there's state and federal funding that's involved as well. So every year the budget is approved, or not approved, but it's presented by the board to the towns to ultimately vote for approval of funding for the school system. The other thing that towns need to decide is if and as the board may recommend or consider reducing campuses, each town as it stands today has to vote to close the elementary school in that town by that town. So it's a very important decision-making process to enact a district-wide necessity, if you will, or need. Next slide, please. So here are some of the things that we're looking at to inform this challenging decisions that the board ultimately is going to need to make, not easy ones. The committee, the board charged a committee of townspeople, board people, plus some of Patrick's administration to provide a perspective to Patrick so that he can see different points of view, if you will, through the eyes of a few different people as he walks down this path to understand what needs to be done to keep the schools viable from a quality of education point of view. The board, like I said, is made up of a group of community as well as board and team administration people. The charge was developed by the board, the full board, and it contained 18 essential questions, I guess you could, what they were termed. And those questions were collected at the end of the last final community engagement work session last fall, as administrators, board, and some community members were grappling with what the different scenarios might be and the viability of each one of them. And these were kind of like loose end questions that individuals had concerns about. Of that group of questions, 13 of them, we could call them hard questions or questions that need data to back them up, if you will. And that expertise to answer those questions clearly lies within the superintendent's realm and his team. There were 2 other questions on that list that really folded in within the work of the Community Engagement Committee. Not that they signed up to answer these 2 questions, but those 2 questions had to do with understanding the town's inputs and also to pulse people on any sort of a consolidation or proposal that might be developed. So those walk hand in hand with the work that the Community Engagement Committee is doing. So we'll know those answers as they develop their work. And then there was 3 soft questions, if you will, remaining that the Facilities Committee has been discussing. They have to do with impacts to changing campuses, closing campuses, if you will, at the elementary level, and then also one question dealt with at the high school level. The Facilities Committee is working on inputs to these 3 questions as homework. We had our meeting in October and started a discussion, and there were a lot of points and inputs and stuff. So we agreed to take them as homework, if you will, and then consolidate them for a discussion of all ideas on paper at our November meeting. And we're looking at, both positive and trying to delineate both the positive aspects and the negative aspects of each question, as well as any sort of general comment that will be melded together. Next slide, please. Ooh, no, that's not, I'm sorry, back, there we go. So we also started looking at the complexity of the issue and decided to put together a matrix, if you will, that would list out the options. There's options that were part of the chart, and then there's options that were delineated in the NASDAQ report. Some of them dovetail together and are essentially the same option. Other ones have some subtle difference, and some of them are radically different that NASDAQ provided us with. But we took those options, there's 11 in all, and laid them out across the different aspects and values that we've been struggling with. And they pretty much end up in 3 different buckets: programming or educational values, dollars, cost, and brick and mortar, which would be operation of campuses or a variety of campuses. And you can see those on this chart. Generally, you can't read them probably, but you can see them generally across the top. And if you can see the colors, the blue ones are all listed from the community values developed last fall. The red ones, mostly to the right, were charge questions, and the black ones, which mostly center around dollars, were developed as part of the chart to consider dollars, which weren't heavily discussed with either the community values or the options at the last the options at the last work session last fall. So the committee met, as we talked about this in October. We started looking at the chart and again realized there's a lot of input and a lot of thought that needs to go in it. So again, we had homework. We went away with homework to fill out this chart, and it's relatively high level chart, plus minus or zero as no neutral, if you will. And then we will be taking this and putting it together so that everybody on the committee can see what the individual responses are and then discuss the alignment or lack thereof of the chart in their November meeting. I think that's really pretty much where the facilities committee is. We're looking to consolidate our activities in the November meeting and have things start to really come together and then finish up with an advisement, I guess you'd say. You know, Patrick ultimately and his staff, his team will ultimately have the daunting task of determining what to propose to the board for options and whatnot. So we are providing a lens from a different perspective, and we will hopefully at the end of reviewing our option matrix come up with 3 different scenarios, kind of bucketed in operating all 6 schools, whatever configuration that would end up being in, and narrowing down the options for campus realignment within the district, and then also partnering with Addison Northwest and looking at campus realignment along with partnering with Addison Northwest. And you can see the 3 big boxes on this matrix. If you can see the detail, is basically what is the thought processes in each one of those buckets. So we look if we will be successful if we can narrow it down to 3 options and hand those to Patrick so that he can have that input to make further clarify or consider what his options are. So thank you for taking the time to listen. That's, I guess, back to Krista or Sue.
Yeah, so before we, so thank you, Kevin, and I know there's a lot of information here to digest. I did want to let everyone know that there are, that all of the links in this presentation are going to be shared back out and also live on the Community Engagement Committee's webpage, which is pretty easy to find from the MAUSD homepage. So Kevin, so I don't think we expected anyone to be able to read this options matrix slide, but there are links to those that we'd like to make available to everyone. And it's all going to live in a notes document. So as we get into the Q&A, I'm going to capture all of the questions people have and the responses, and that will be shared out as well. So I think Sue was going to help us facilitate this next portion of our evening where we get to hear a little bit from you.
So Shannon, if you're able to stop your screen sharing so we can see each other again. And what I'd love to do is, for this part, is if folks can put their videos on, that will be really helpful to us. And we will invite you to raise your hand virtually, which you can do if you click on the participant button. There's a list at the bottom right of that window that says raise hand. So if you'd like to use that feature to raise your hand, that's great. Also, we'll be scanning, and if you just want to physically raise your hand, if your video is on, we can also see you that way. So Shannon, is my understanding that you've been collecting a few questions as Kevin was talking?
None have come in yet, but if
Okay.
people want to send questions to me through the chat box, I can read them out loud.
And then Shannon, do you want to call on people that you see doing the virtual hand as well?
Yep, I can certainly do that. Whenever you're ready, I can start.
Okay.
So Allison, you've had your hand up for a while, and I don't know if that was just a inadvertent or not, but if you have a question, you have the floor, Allison. Okay, Michael Fisher.
Unmute myself. Just a clarifying question about the video. Is the $200,000 example of projected increases accurate for both the 2/3 of the population that pay based on income and the 1/3 of the population that pay based on property value?
So Patrick, would you like to take that one?
Sure, that information is more pertinent to the 1/3 that would pay based on the home value. There'd be a different, the reality is there's a more complicated formula that would produce the tax impact based on the on a family's income. And we'll be working, we have in the past created a sort of a tool that folks could enter their income and it would at least give a ballpark on what the tax impact would be. And we'll be working on a similar tool as this process moves forward as well.
So
I think I understand it's not accurate for 2/3 of the population.
Correct. It's to help understand the 1/3 that pays based on property value.
Thank you.
And Cheryl?
First, I wanted to say thank you. I came to the one last week, and it's wonderful to know that people are sort of giving us more opportunities to think and talk about this before the survey goes out. So I just want to say my appreciation that you've really heard people say, maybe there's some more options that we haven't uncovered yet, and let's look at them. And I guess one of my questions has been, have we, in looking at staffing patterns, I was struck when you said it was 50 years ago that we created this district. So our experience has changed a whole lot in 50 years. We have instructional options for us that we didn't have way back then. And I'm just wondering about, can we do multi-age classrooms? Have we looked at what might happen if we kept all of the elementary campuses open, but went to multi-age classrooms and then maybe brought some additional services into those buildings?
We do have many multi-grade classrooms currently.
Mm-hmm.
So that wouldn't be a new option to necessarily bring in.
So it wouldn't be new. I'm just wondering if we've looked at maybe increasing the number of those.
Yeah, I think that's in an option that operates all 6 schools, so all 5 elementary schools with declining enrollment, I think that becomes a likely necessity. Currently, and for the most part, maybe for all 5 years that I've been here, the multi-grade classrooms have included 2 grades in them. For example, a 5-6 classroom or a 3-4 classroom. Depending on configuration, as population declines, if we continue to operate 5 elementary schools, we could see 3 grades in a classroom or possibly 4 grades in a classroom, depending on what the numbers were. For example, a 3, 4, 5, 6 classroom. Sort of slowly working back toward that sort of notion of a one-room schoolhouse with all grades in one classroom. Obviously not quite getting to that point, I don't think, at least not for a long time, but working in that direction in terms of the number of grades that might be combined.
Thank you. And thanks again for giving us more time to be thinking and talking.
All right, we have a number of questions. Just to clarify, each town votes on their town school. So New Haven votes as to whether Beaman would close and so on.
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay, next question. If one town votes to keep their school, but we as a district are over the per pupil spending, is the entire district penalized with a tax increase?
Yeah, so as a consolidated district, we have a single tax rate, a single education tax rate. So our spending as a district is divided amongst the pupils that we have as a district, and that is what produces our tax rate. So yeah, whatever it is that causes our spending to be over the spending threshold impacts all 5 towns.
Okay. I would like to know if there will be a discussion about financial impact and how combining schools and or districts will affect the tax impact and when we begin looking at these decisions.
Absolutely. So that's obviously the reason we're not having these conversations, because we all think it will be great for our community to be doing this, right? This is driven by financial pressures that we're facing. So the financial information is critical, and it will have to be part of the conversation as more and more is understood. And that's part of the reason behind having a little bit more time, so that as we present more of the financials, there's additional time to digest that and other information ahead of the board needing to make a decision about what to bring before voters.
Okay, and Sue, it says Sue and Eric on my screen has a question. Go ahead, Sue. And then we'll go to Deirdre and then back to my other list, which would be Herb.
Thanks, Shannon. My name is Sue White. I live in Lincoln. I have 2 boys who have been through the system quite happily. And I just want to toss it out there, knowing that the healthcare piece of our budget continues to be a double-digit increase every year. And I feel like, where's the effort to pull that piece of the budget out and advocate for it on a bigger level, so that all of us can have access to the healthcare that we need, and that paying for the healthcare within the context of our school systems doesn't have to come out of programming and staffing for our children's education. And I'd be happy to be part of that effort, knowing that healthcare is something that we all need and is really, really important. Thanks.
Can I make a quick response to that? Thanks, Sue. One of the things that I'm going to add to the notes that I'm compiling is the school community partnership document that we started when we had some conversations this summer. One of the things the Community Engagement Committee did was to try to bring people beyond just board members together around issues exactly like this one. Housing was another one, early childhood education was another one. Just recognizing the capacity of the board or administration to take on all of those issues on our own. We wanted to invite community members to be part of that effort together. And so, I think we had some good and early conversations. I think there was some movement around a couple topics, especially around broadband access, which is great. But there's definitely much more work that could be done, and that we would really greatly appreciate community activism around. And so that document I will share back out, and folks can sign up to connect with one another around these things. I would just also add that it is tricky from the board and administrator standpoint to make decisions based on the possibility of things changing at the legislative level, state level, or federal level, without those being known. And so we're in a hard position of trying to anticipate what healthcare might look like next year or several years from now, even when change may be possible. So, it is a dilemma, but we would welcome and encourage community activism, participation, advocacy in whatever way that it's available.
And I'd like to add that, healthcare is being negotiated at the state level now in an effort to streamline that, and whether it's effective or not remains to be seen. But we are no longer negotiating healthcare costs at the district level. So in a sense, that has already been, the negotiation part has already been kicked up to the state level.
All right, thank you. Herb Olson.
There we go. All right. It's always a bit of a challenge here. So, thanks for especially the Community Engagement Committee. I think you have a great turnout tonight, and I think that's a function of the respect that you guys have in terms of trying to, get feedback from folks. So my question has to do with, whether we're really ready for this vote for a decision about closing schools. And it strikes me that, last January, I think the administration came to the board and said, really, we need to close some schools if we're going to avoid penalty thresholds or reduction in educational programs. And the board, I think, did the right thing. They set up a process, community engagement, and a financial feasibility facilities committee to get into the weeds. And to me, that means that the board was trying to fulfill their obligation about due diligence to make sure that, what an important decision like this was fully vetted. Unfortunately, I don't think, I think it's pretty clear, and I think Kevin acknowledged that we really haven't gotten into the financial details. In fact, the meetings that I heard, the facilities committee explicitly said, we're not going to deal with financial issues. We're going to leave that to the administration. And yet the committee was still trying to grapple with, well, let's narrow down the options to give to Patrick than to present to the board. And I don't understand how that makes any sense. I don't understand how the board can really fulfill their obligation to explore all the alternatives if they're not going to have good financial information. And, the options can be very much narrowed. I think there are financially feasible options that should be explored. I don't think we have the time to do it this year. I think if we really want to explore closing schools, we need a much better, more in-depth financial analysis of the options. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Deirdre and Tammy, and then Kristen Blanchett.
Could I just interject a little bit?
Yes.
One thing and maybe Herb didn't mean it this way, but the facilities feasibility committee is not going to hand Patrick 3 options for him to consider to deal with. We are giving him a perspective on some options, and then he will take that information and, based on what he knows with his expertise as operating the district, develop some scenarios with that input, not from that input. And at that point, he will be providing detailed cost information as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kevin, and I understand that. I guess my main point is that I don't think you folks, Kevin, have really had the opportunity to explore the financial ramifications, both school closings and of alternatives. As you said yourself, money was really not heavily discussed in your committee. And that's a key element, I think, for the board to have, key information for the board to have before it makes the decision about school closings. Thank you.
Thank you. Deirdre and Tammy, and then Kristen, we're coming to you.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that there's almost 100 people on here, so I just want to pause and say yes, that's really good. That means people care, as we know, and that, again, the engagement committee did a good job, and we did a great job calling our neighbors. So I just want to recognize that, because there's so much to wail about these days, but that's a good thing, so thank you. I wanted to make a comment and then offer a question, and the comment is to echo what a few people had said, which is, I think this is a really important moment to pause. I'm not saying stop in community engagement. I'm not, I want us to keep being creative, but we are in the middle of a world pandemic, as we know, and it's a really hard time to make decisions that will drastically change our community forever. And so I want to advocate for that. I know some other people said that, and I can say that, you can explain that a little more another time. My question is really about this idea of my concern is that history has shown us that at times when we're making decisions about consolidation, that we thought we were going to save money and we never did. That was the fact with Act 46. I still haven't seen this idea of where we save the money. And so my question to the board, I would say, not Patrick, but of course, Patrick, please jump in. Where is the information that says if and how when we close a few of the smaller schools, how will we actually save money and solve the problem that we're trying to address?
I just want to respond to that, and if I could, to just say that those are the questions we are going to be asking of Patrick when we hear his recommendations. And so all of the feedback from these engagement efforts help us to remember which questions are important to our community, but many of them are ones that I think the board is already imagining we're going to request of Patrick. And in order for him to really provide a pretty in-depth analysis, I think that's why he's looking to narrow down what was initially, 7 to 8 scenarios to 3 to 4. So, so the input from the feasibility committee and the input from these events helps to narrow that down, but it is without the hard data that we'll be getting from him when we hear his recommendations. So thank you for those questions, and we hope that we will have more information on that.
All right, Kristen?
Oh, thank you. And thank you everybody for being here tonight. This is absolutely great to get input. So I was on the Moncton board for 7 years, and now I've been on this board as a Moncton rep for 2 years. So some history there about dealing with budgets and what have you. And I think that, going forward, we would not want to go over the threshold because then we're paying money for nothing. So I mean, that's just been the marginal line for the school board, all the years I've been on. We will not go over that because then it really seems like a waste of taxpayer money. So as we look at decreased revenue, I think that would not be a good option to do that. And so, we would have to look at some of the other options which we've put out there. And I think we're really looking at the information we have, that not this budget, but the budget for 22, 23, is that it? So the budget for the year after next is the one where we would have to really start making some bigger changes. And as we go through the budget process, which is coming up, we'll have more public meetings, and some of those numbers will come out there. Again, all great questions people are asking, and information that we will have at some time in the next couple of months. But again, we don't want taxpayers to pay for nothing by going over that tax threshold. I would not vote for a budget that did that personally, and I don't think any of you would either, probably, unless you have tons of money. And the other question that we've talked about a little bit is, how small is too small for a school too, socially and emotionally for kids? That's just another thing I wanted to put out there. But again, thank you for being here and keep asking questions. It's really helpful. Thank you.
We have just a couple more questions in the chat that I think would be helpful for people to hear. Has it been clarified that closing a school will save money? For instance, if we reduce staff within the existing structure, is that less fiscally sound than doing that with less buildings?
Well, there is there's a certain amount of cost to operate a building. The school district fortunately doesn't have to pay property tax on it, but they're still paying electricity and fuel to heat that building, plus the upkeep of that building. So to some degree, how dramatic it is in the scheme of what we need to consider, there is inherent cost savings.
Thank you. Have you included any analyses of how COVID-19 has impacted population increase in Vermont and therefore in enrollment? Additionally, There are projections that due to climate change, there will be migration to northeastern US. Does it make sense to make drastic decisions now when enrollment may change direction in the near future?
We had a little bit of a conversation with NASDAQ when they presented to the facilities committee about COVID, not so much about global warming. And they have not seen, they're cognizant of it, and it's a little bit too early to say. They've done a lot of work in the Berkshires in Massachusetts about the same time that they developed our report, with the same concerns and the same looks and that sort of thing. But they haven't seen anything that was shaking their positions, if you will, at the point that they developed the report.
Patrick, did you want to offer something as well about that?
Sure, just sort of a mathematical exercise. When you look at that figure that was in the video of about $6.5 million over the next 5 years, and you divide that on the cost per pupil, that equates to a little over 300 students we would need to move in to fully address the financial concern that we see. And so that would require not losing the 100+ students NASDAQ projects we'd lose over the next 5 years, and instead gain by over 300. So that swing of about 450 students in the next 5 years, even with climate migration or COVID migration, I think falls short of being the solution to our financial challenge, even if we do have a bit of migration happening.
Christy, I think we answered, Christy Sumner, the second part of your question, but I'll ask the first. Besides the short-term relief during the pandemic and understanding that this is hopefully not with us long-term, has this committee and administration and staff used this window into possibilities of planning outside of the box / building, a lot of creative use of space in outdoor classrooms, for instance?
I guess I can speak to that a little bit. So I think for sure the idea of use of space. So what comes to mind for me when I'm thinking of that is the public-private partnership conversations that have been happening, which I think have a lot of potential value. Unfortunately, the dollar value associated with sort of renting space or leasing space falls again far short of addressing the financial concerns. I think we calculated needing to rent out something like 150 classrooms or whatever the number was, which I don't think we even have that many classrooms. So from that sort of use of space concept, I think that didn't present as a viable solution for the financial challenge. And in terms of outdoor space, obviously there's a lot of outdoor space being utilized now, but I'm not sure where the question's going in terms of the use of outdoor space and addressing the financial challenges that are prompting these conversations.
Whoops. We have a couple more people, it looks like, that have had their hands raised, so maybe we can get a few more questions and then start to transition to some small group conversation.
We have a couple more questions here, and then we'll get to Jen and Michael.
Thanks.
Would a partnership with Addison Northwest allow for economies of scale at the superintendent's and central office level?
Yeah, that's the idea, right? So really, in some ways, what we're working through here are pretty high overhead costs, given the number of students that we're providing education to. And that's a similar experience to what's happening in Addison Northwest. So for sure, as populations of students decrease, looking to limit that overhead cost is a driving factor. And absolutely, operating two central office staff increases that overhead cost. So I think taking a look at that possible partnership, if that meant sort of on the more extreme end of partnering, which would be merging districts, that's what it would really take to be able to eliminate a central office, which does produce considerable savings and decreases at overhead. So that's really where the potential lies on the greatest end in terms of a partnership with Addison Northwest.
Thank you. I have always thought of the penalty fee for crossing the threshold as a tax on higher spending districts, which helps fund districts that are getting higher property tax relief. We are not throwing this money away. It is not leaving our state. Additionally, do we really know what the threshold money will be in the future?
Great question. I want to preface all of this by saying we don't know for certain a whole lot of things. We don't know for certain what the spending threshold is for next school year. That information doesn't exist yet, or if it does, it hasn't been shared with schools in terms of building budgets. What we're doing is making a lot of projections about the future based on what we've seen in the past, what we know about formulas that exist, using information from NASDAQ. So there's very little that we know for sure in terms of the specifics of what's happening, but I think we have a lot of historical data, which is now supported by what the NASDAQ report produced, that suggests we're on a trajectory that is problematic and will get more and more problematic as time goes on if we don't make some significant change.
All right, so Jen said that I asked her question, so somebody else had the same question. We'll ask Mike Fisher's and Chris Ross's, and then Sue, I'm gonna look to you to see if you wanna keep asking questions or if you wanna go into the breakout sessions, and then maybe if there's time, do more Q&A. I'll leave that part up to you. So Michael Fisher, if you wanna ask your question, and then Chris Ross, and then Sue, I'll leave it up to you if you wanna continue with Q&A or move to the next segment.
Thanks.
So Michael Fisher, you have the floor.
Thank you. I want to add my voice to the appreciation to both the committee and the superintendent's office and to the community. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. This is a great showing, and I really appreciate this conversation. I think it's important. So in this conversation, I guess I just wanted to respond to a few things that have been said. Sort of most directly to Kristen's point about never going over the threshold. It depends. If we barely went over it and it was an ability to save our school, I mean, it depends on the degree, I guess is what I would say. But to that point, I really did want to repeat something I said before at a previous meeting. The high spending threshold is no longer, a percent of the average. It's no longer 130% of the average. It's now fixed at a certain point in time, and Dave Sharp and Caleb Elder know this way better than I do, but there's a lot of districts that are bumping into the high spending threshold. We'll have a lot of company of people, of towns who are struggling with this same problem. Since the last time I spoke to this, I did have an opportunity to speak with the speaker and raise the issue, and she did recognize that there will be a lot of pressure on them to deal with this. Now, you can't take that to the bank. I appreciate the board saying you can't predict legislation, but I did want to say that out loud. And then the other point I wanted to make was I hope when there are proposals to evaluate closing schools that they will come with an evaluation of the number of staff reductions associated with those closures. This goes a little bit to the point of how much do you save. I can't remember the number. How much of the budget is staffing? It's a high percentage. And so I really just want to make the point. I assume that when we talk about closing schools, there would be some savings associated with not running those schools, and there would be savings associated with reductions in staff with any of those scenarios. And I look forward to seeing those. Thank you.
Thank you. And last question, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Sue. Chris Ross.
Hi, Christopher Ross with the Addison Independent. Thanks for convening this town hall. Kevin said, as it stands today, town voters are the only ones with the authority to approve school closure in the school that they host in their own town. Under what circumstances would that change? And does the district anticipate that changing?
That would require a change in articles of agreement or articles of agreement, which would have to be voted on by the entire district. And, you know, that issue is not unknown, but it's not seriously being pursued at this point. I think I can, that's safe to say.
Thanks. So thanks everybody for all of these great questions that, as a reminder, Krista has been capturing. And Herb, I know you've raised your hand, but I think we'll give some other folks a chance to talk, and then if we have time after, we'll come back around to you. There are a lot of people on this video call, and you've just taken in a lot of information. You've heard a lot of thoughtful questions. We really want to give every single person in this call a chance to speak and share their opinion. So we're going to take about 15 minutes and we're going to break into small groups thanks to Shannon's wizardry. Shannon, I think if we set up about 15 groups, we'll have about 5 or 6 people in each group. And Shannon's going to put these questions in the chat, but I'll just share them with you. So we just want to give you a chance, keeping in mind everything you've heard, some of the information you've heard, some of the questions, the circumstances that your community finds itself in. Just, we invite you to go around in your small group and just share with each other a word or two that captures how you feel right now about what your community is facing. We are interested in hearing some of your hopes for how your district moves forward. And then as a group, we invite you to talk about a key question that you have and that you would like to have answered. Those are the 3 questions that we're asking you to consider. So Shannon, I'm going to ask you to divide people up into these rooms, and we'll let you know when there's a couple of minutes left before you're going to be brought back in to the full room. It can be a little abrupt. And then we'll hear from some of the groups, and we'll invite you to, if your group has a question, to share it in the chat to Shannon, and we're going to collect all of that, and we'll continue with a few more questions and answers. Okay, Shannon, I think we're ready. Welcome back, everybody. We should all be back together shortly. If your group came up with some questions that you want to have answered, if you can put those in the chat box, that would be great, to Shannon, and she'll collect those. Welcome back, everybody. In our remaining time together, we're going to hear from a few of the groups, and then we're going to turn it over to Krista, and she's going to talk a little bit about next steps. So I think we had about 14 different groups. We're not going to go around and hear from everybody, but we'd like to invite you, if your group had a question or two that you really would like to learn more about, if you can just send those in the chat box to Shannon, and she'll share those with Krista, and I know Krista is putting together an FAQ kind of thing to share back with the community based on your questions. So feel free to put those in the chat box. And at the same time, we would love to hear from a few groups, just some highlights of your small group conversation. And I want to encourage people who haven't had a chance to share yet in this meeting to speak up. So you can either physically raise your hand or use the chat box, or just start speaking. Christy, were you trying to raise your hand? No. Pamela, would you like to share?
Sure. So in our group, we talked about the elementary schools and, you know, how important we've found with COVID that our younger kids are back in the classroom and back with our teachers. and the thoughts that if enrollment is going down in the district, because we believe one of the options on the table was possibly school choice for the high school students, that have we considered utilizing our space for our 7th and 8th graders back in the elementary schools, since we have some room in those school buildings, if we decide to, pursue more of a school choice or some sort of a connection with another high school specifically. So we were talking about, how we see other school districts like Heinsberg does that same type of situation where they keep their, 8th graders right through 8th graders so that they don't have a separate building or need for that.
Great.
So
Thanks.
that's one of the things we talked about.
Great. Thanks, Pamela. How about another group?
So our group mostly focused on considering the community as all 5 towns and wanting engagement from that. And the question that we were discussing is really, how do we reach that entire community and have their engagement decision as part of the process so that we have this collective ownership of whatever outcome we have.
Great, thank you. Mary, I think you might have been giving a thumbs up to Pamela, but I just want to make sure that was your intention. Did you want to share? And if you just can unmute yourself, that would be great.
So, thank you. No, that was an idea that I hadn't heard before, and I liked it, Pamela's idea.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else like to share some highlights from your small group conversation?
Hi, I was just going to share what our group wrote down for their questions. One was, again, reiterating the question about healthcare. And the second one was whether or not the leadership has discussed innovative ways to actually utilize our buildings as sort of magnet schools or magnet attraction for expanding the clock and increasing, offering evening classes for tuition or flexible school days so that students could come to our high school from other school districts because it meets with their family needs or their family schedules. Have we considered how we would expand what we offer as a school versus reducing?
Great, thank you, Scott. Other thoughts?
I'll just say, correct me if I'm wrong, Group 8, I think we came from very different perspectives and was impressed with the general agreement of maybe all of or many of the members of the group.
Michael, what was your general agreement?
Just, fear, concern, value of the school to the community.
Let's hear from one more group at least, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Krista.
I know that our group talked about what can we build instead of what can we lose, and can we be really future oriented. And then one person said their word was daunting, and I think that the task is daunting, and I think that's pretty much what everybody is saying tonight.
Great, thanks, Kristen. Does anybody else want to share before we turn it over to Krista?
Sure, I'll say that in our group, we talked about the word devastating to describe what could be happening, what seems to be happening. And one of the wonders was, what impact will these community engagement discussions have on the options that Patrick presents in December?
Thank you.
Like how transparent is the process, I think, is one of the questions.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly add that our group talked a little bit about adaptations with COVID and being open to the mixed use of technology to influence our learning for our students. We talked about concerns in terms of equity. The technology has definitely brought forth inequity in our district. And then one of the things that we were just very, very concerned about was how integral our schools are in shaping our communities and shaping pretty much our entire lives, I would say, from how we form friendships with each other and how we form connections with our broader community, and how our children grow to be community members. And our schools are the foundation for all of that. So if you take one away, we're just very fearful of what that looks like. And also just what the demographics of our communities, how that would change if you took a school away from any one of our communities.
Thank you, Sally. Yes, Elizabeth, I think.
Our group asked lots of good questions. One, I think, is to make sure that we ask who would be willing to pay more, and how do we maintain equity for all students? What costs will be for towns if new construction is needed in order to consolidate, and what the cost for the town would be if they got their school back. And also, how will we be transparent about this and make sure that the community, that we are hearing voices from everyone in our community.
Thank you. I'm definitely hearing some themes among what people are sharing about, first of all, of course, the way people value the schools in their town and the the dilemma that you're facing. And then also people are sharing thoughts about this desire for creative thinking and transparency, and to continue to engage with the community and hear people's views and to make sure that those are incorporated in your decision making. So thank you, everybody. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen. She's going to talk a little bit about some of the next steps, what's coming.
Okay, thank you, and thanks everyone for hanging in there. Before I talk about next steps, I guess I have the last word on group reporting in. I'll just share a quote from our group, which was, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." So that was something I wanted to share. So Shannon, if you could go to sharing the slide deck again, and it's number 26, which is our planning timeline. Oops. Okay, so I just wanted to look at this again as we think about next steps, and to kind of remind everybody about where we are in this process. So as Kevin mentioned, his committee is going to be summarizing their work coming up in the next couple of weeks, and that work plus the engagement with the community and the data that Patrick and his team have is going to help inform his recommendation that he's going to bring to the board. And I think, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's going to really be several different options that we can consider bringing before the voters. So it isn't going to be just one option to explore. So that will be probably a special board meeting, and it's going to most likely take place that first week or so in December. And we're still working out our schedule, but we'll publicize that date when it happens. So Patrick's going to share his thinking and the data that informs these recommendations. And then the board is going to go back out to the community to get feedback on those recommendations. And so there'll be additional community engagement, something probably like this or something similar. And then we're going to put out a survey, and that's going to be a way for us to gauge people's interest in exploring any one of the different recommendations that Patrick makes, as well as getting a sense from folks on questions around tax increases. And I think that was something that was mentioned tonight. So not just yes or no, do you want your taxes to go up, but rather by how much would you consider in order to keep this scenario or that scenario. So we're working hard to make that a really robust survey that can come back to the board, and we will look at all of that information and decide in our January board meeting what we might want to put on the ballot for town meeting. And so there's a time period by which we have to warn the vote at town meeting, and that is, I think our deadline is January 30th. And at the very least, we'll be warning our budget for next year. But based on all these conversations and recommendations and input, we may decide to add other ballot items, and that will be what, what we're trying to get our head around after we hear from Patrick. So those are what's going to happen. That's kind of the timeline for what's going to happen next. After this meeting, the notes from this and the October 14th virtual hall will all be posted to the Community Engagement Committee webpage. And we'll share back out those notes and links in the other ways that we share information as well. So Front Porch Forum and Facebook and all the places. So you should be able to access all of that. We invite and encourage people to attend any one of these upcoming meetings. And if you have any questions at all about the process, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And I think that kind of covers what our next steps are. So I would like to just wrap up by thanking all of you again for coming tonight. I'd also like to thank Shannon for helping us navigate the Zoom piece of this, which is super challenging and incredibly helpful to have someone focusing just on that. So thank you, Shannon. Thank you to Sue for all of your work. You've been a great partner over the past few years, and we really appreciate your insight and your assistance. And thanks to Patrick and Kevin and everyone else for being here with us. So we look forward to seeing more of you in the coming months. And I think that's about it. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Krista.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.